Let's get to Tim Walz, who, just when you think no one's sitting at this table, neither she nor the big white blanket, can embarrass themselves any further, he does. She asks him, to her credit, about the carrying the weapons in war, which we know is a lie. He never served in war. He's been stealing valor for quite some time.
Tim Walz has coasted for years on his carefully polished image of being Minnesota nice. A smile here, a handshake there, and that laid-back, corn-fed charm. But when Megyn Kelly takes aim, that easygoing mask doesn't just slip, it shatters into pieces on live television. For so long, Walz has sold himself as the everyman governor, a Midwestern dad who just happens to be running a state. He leans on the image of the friendly neighbor who shows up to potlucks with a casserole and a football story. But Kelly isn't buying the act for 1 second. Megyn Kelly has a knack for peeling back political theater, and when she turns her spotlight on Walz, his contradictions glow like neon signs in the dark. She doesn't just poke holes in his narrative, she burns through it completely. The first strike comes when she challenges his so-called military record. Walz has claimed he carried weapons of war, but the truth is, he never deployed to a combat zone. That's not a slip of the tongue, it's a misrepresentation, and Kelly won't let it slide. When confronted, Walz tries to dodge with his folksy charm. He says he misspoke, then rambles about teaching, his long service, and his supposed passion for protecting kids. But instead of clarity, he delivers a jumble of half-excuses and emotional deflections.
Walz is also out on the new media tour and trying to help her when he's not defending his comments on the Electoral College. And he sits down with Michael Strahan, who's the best thing ABC has going. And Strahan actually asks him about his many, many lies. There's a much longer list than actually came up, but he did raise it to his credit. Here's how that went.
You said that you carried weapons in war, but you have never deployed actually in a war zone. A campaign official said that you misspoke. Did you?
Well, first of all, I'm incredibly proud. I've done 24 years of wearing the uniform of this country. Equally proud of my service in a public school classroom, whether it's Congress or the governor. My record speaks for itself, but I think people are coming to get to know me. I speak like they do. I speak candidly. I wear my emotions on my sleeves, and I speak especially passionately about our children being shot in schools.
Kelly doesn't laugh this off. She spotlights it like a searchlight on a backyard raccoon. Walz isn't the steady hand of the Midwest. He's the human embodiment of beige wallpaper, bland, forgettable, and only noticed when the flaws show. She presses harder. Walz once said he was in Hong Kong during the Tiananmen Square massacre, but records prove otherwise. He wasn't there during the tragedy at all. Yet he used the story to boost his credibility. When asked directly if he lied, Walz tries another pivot. He insists people know who I am, and that he misspoke due to bad grammar or muddled dates. But opponents see it for what it is, an attempt to embellish his past. Kelly cuts through the excuses with precision. She shows the pattern. Walz constantly reinvents his story depending on the moment. He wants to look like a soldier, a teacher, a man of the people. But each version contradicts the other. The so-called Minnesota nice becomes Minnesota nonsense. Because when crisis strikes, Walz doesn't lead, he poses for the cameras. He's quick with photo ops and slow with real solutions. And Kelly makes sure the audience sees the difference. During the pandemic, Walz projected calm on camera, but behind the scenes, his leadership was chaos. Rules shifted daily, priorities flipped overnight, and people were left confused instead of reassured. Calm isn't the same as competent. Kelly highlights how his handling of public safety was just as disastrous.
Some statements that just aren't true. And the comment about weapons of war that I carried in war, which you didn't. You said that you were in Hong Kong during the Tiananmen Square massacre when you weren't. You kind of chalked it all up to bad grammar or getting the dates wrong.
Yeah.
But your opponents say you lied to make yourself look better. Do they have a point?
Well, look, 35 years ago, got the opportunity to be in Hong Kong, be in China, learned a lot about it, served 24 years in the National Guard, passionately, in an instance, talking about gun violence in schools.
One day, he talks tough about supporting law enforcement. The next, he folds under activist pressure. It wasn't leadership, it was political. Duck and cover. When social unrest erupted in Minnesota, Walz froze like a deer in headlights. Activists wanted sweeping change, citizens wanted safety, and Walz delivered neither. Instead, he disappointed both sides, proving indecision isn't balance. It's weakness. Megyn Kelly skewers his hypocrisy. He preaches small-town values while pushing big government policies that contradict them. He calls himself a unifier, yet his only real accomplishment is uniting everyone in disappointment. The hits keep coming. Kelly mocks his attempts to appear authentic. Sure, he tells stories about rural Nebraska and teaching high school, but that doesn't erase the reality of his polished career politician act. It's not authenticity, it's cosplay. She drives the point home with brutal comparisons. Walz's leadership is like a Minnesota winter, long, drawn out, and full of empty promises that spring is just around the corner. But spring never comes when you need it most. Even his attempts at hunting photo ops fall flat. When asked about his gun, he gives a robotic, awkward answer as if he's reading from a cheat sheet.
The fallout continues for Tim Walz on the disastrous performance he delivered, in particular when it comes to his self-described knuckle-headed behavior, which was just his latest in a series of lies. The reason he resorted to, "I'm a knucklehead," was he got confronted with his latest lie.
Kelly and her audience see through the performance instantly. Then there's the economy. Walz brags about stewardship, but Minnesota taxpayers feel squeezed dry. High taxes, bloated budgets, and yet basic services still lag. Kelly slices through the spin, showing that it's all optics, no outcomes. She argues Walz isn't preparing for leadership on the national stage. He's faking it until he makes it. But ambition without competence isn't vision, it's delusion. And Kelly makes that case with devastating clarity. In the end, she paints Walz not as a leader, but as a survivor. His only true skill is dodging accountability with a pleasant grin and a folksy phrase. But Kelly shows the world that behind the smile lies a record of contradictions, failures, and avoidance. Kelly doesn't just stop at contradictions. She exposes how Walz thrives on the public's short memory. He counts on people forgetting the details, moving on, or just not caring enough to ask hard questions. But this time, Kelly refuses to let him slip away. She calls his evasions what they are, a political shell game. Instead of addressing issues head-on, Walz buries them in bureaucracy, hides behind talking points, and waits for the noise to die down. That's not leadership. It's cowardice dressed in folksy charm. When pressed about his misleading claims, Walz blames grammar problems and emotional passion. But Kelly isn't fooled. She makes it clear.
I think people know me. They know who I am. They know where my heart is. And again, my record has been out there for over 40 years to speak for itself.
And the idea that you said that you were in war,
Yeah.
Did you misspeak as the campaign has said?
Yeah, I said we were talking about, in this case, this was after a school shooting, the ideas of carrying these weapons of war. And my wife, the English teacher, told me my grammar is not always correct. But again, if it's not this, it's an attack on my children for showing love for me, or it's an attack on my dog.
This took chutzpah. Let's go through it. You said you carried weapons in war, but you've never deployed in a war zone. A campaign official of yours said you misspoke. Did you? Well, I'm proud, incredibly proud of my record.
You don't misspeak over and over. It's a pattern of deception, not an accident. Even his defenders struggled to protect him. Vice President Harris advised Walz to be more careful with his words, but careful wording won't save a politician with a history of bending the truth. Kelly drives this point home with ruthless clarity. She dismantles his claim of being a unifier. To Democrats, he's too cautious. To Republicans, he's too reckless. To independents, he's just indecisive. Walz hasn't built unity. He's built universal frustration. Kelly exposes the danger of his mediocrity. Leaders who coast on charm while avoiding decisions leave everyone else paying the price. Mediocrity in politics isn't harmless, it's destructive, and Walz is the proof. The governor's constant fallback, "People know who I am," rings hollow under Kelly's interrogation. If people truly knew him, she argues, they'd see a man who survives by dodging scrutiny, not by delivering results. Education, Walz's supposed priority, also collapses under Kelly's review. Test scores in reading and math have dropped. Classrooms are struggling. And yet, his solutions look more like photo ops than serious reforms. She points out the cruel irony. Walz promises equity and opportunity, but under his watch, Minnesota students have fallen behind national standards. Equity without results is just expensive window dressing.
That's been unearthed. There's a long list of them. This one was that he was in China when the Tiananmen Square disaster unfolded, when hundreds of people were killed. You know whether you were in a place where hundreds of people are being massacred by their government when it happens. But he continues to try to say, like, oh, gee, I was just kind of confused. You know, that happened in May and I was there in August, but I guess I just imagined that I was there, whatever. So he got asked about that debate moment where he completely melted down. Well, they're comparing this moment by Tim Walz to that because he looked so inept and like a faker, like he didn't belong there and he was trying to convince us of something that wasn't real as he decided to go pheasant hunting. And Charlie, you're a gun guy. You tell me whether this looked authentic to you. Here he is.
That's my theory.
And it never fits quite right.
Never fits quite right. Just not quite right. How do you give it back?
Governor, what kind of gun is it?
This was a Beretta A400.
Kelly slams his economic record with the precision of a sledgehammer. Walz raised taxes, expanded budgets, and still left basic services wanting. Minnesotans feel squeezed, and Kelly makes sure viewers feel that squeeze too. She compares his fiscal leadership to buying every kitchen gadget in sight, yet still not knowing how to cook a single meal. Lots of spending, lots of noise, but no real nourishment for the people he's supposed to serve. Even more damning, Kelly shows how Walz uses crisis as political theater. During the pandemic, he posed as the calm, steady guardian. But his policies left businesses crushed, schools closed too long, and families scrambling to survive. By the time Kelly is finished, Walz looks less like a leader and more like a political chameleon, shifting colors whenever convenient, blending in until exposed, and never standing for anything solid when it counts. The legacy of Minnesota Nice lies in ruins, replaced with the image of a man who thought charm was enough. But Kelly proves that charm without truth collapses like a house of cards in the wind. Kelly digs deeper into Walz's record on public safety, showing how his rhetoric never matches reality. He talks about supporting law enforcement, but when the pressure rises, he caves faster than a paper cup in a storm.
Doing this. Equally proud of my service in the classroom. Did I mention I was a teacher and a coach, an assistant coach? Okay, whatever. But he's more stolen valor. In the classroom, I'm in the classroom. My record speaks for itself. It doesn't actually. You've put a lot of lies into that record that you've been called out on by service personnel. You must clarify, as your campaign had tried to do. And now you appear to be distancing yourself from that clarification. And then here's two pieces of this that are really I speak like they do. People are coming to get to know me. I speak like they do. I speak candidly. I wear my emotions on my sleeves, and I speak especially passionately about, and then he goes on to blame it on the school shootings. I guess he was upset about school shootings, so he lied. But stop saying you speak.
Kelly shows how his reliance on excuses erodes trust. A leader who constantly backtracks and pleads "I misspoke" isn't someone who inspires confidence. He's someone who inspires doubt. Even his self-proclaimed title as a teacher and coach comes under fire. Kelly notes how he leans on it like a crutch, repeating it endlessly, as though repeating it enough times will erase his credibility problems. But the classroom background doesn't cover the cracks. If anything, it exposes them. Because Walz tries to transform relatable experiences into shields against hard truths. Kelly refuses to let him hide behind that. She dismantles his claim of being friends with everyone by showing how his indecision has left him with no true allies. Progressives feel betrayed, moderates feel misled, and conservatives see him as a fraud. Kelly sums it up brutally. Walz hasn't united Minnesota. He's united Minnesotans in disappointment. And in today's volatile climate, that failure is more dangerous than ever. She likens his leadership to painting over water damage with a fresh coat of paint. It may look fine for a moment, but the cracks always reappear, worse than before. That's Walz in a nutshell. Cover-ups instead of solutions. She calls him a politician addicted to applause, but allergic to results. Every crisis becomes an opportunity for him to smile, pose, and deflect. But when the cameras turn off, Minnesotans are left with empty hands. Walz, Kelly argues, is the perfect example of a career built on avoidance. Avoiding accountability.
On Wednesday in Pennsylvania, and here's how he handled it.
I have my dates wrong. I was in Hong Kong and China in 1989. That move from Hong Kong into China, it was profound for me. That was the summer of democracy. I said it's where I understood how sacred democracy was. It's what encouraged me, about 15 back and forth with my students, taking them to China. I speak like everybody else speaks. I need to be clear, I will tell you that, but here's my whole point on that thing with China. I do understand China a hell of a lot better than Donald Trump. Kamala Harris understands China.
Avoiding responsibility, avoiding the truth. And avoidance doesn't build a legacy, it destroys it. His ambition for a bigger national role comes under her sharpest ridicule yet. If Walz can't steer Minnesota without stumbling, how could he possibly handle the nation? It's ambition without ability, a dangerous cocktail. By the end of her takedown, Kelly has transformed Walz from Minnesota nice into Minnesota phony, a governor who hid behind a grin only to be exposed as a leader without vision or conviction. She warns that politicians like Walz thrive only as long as people don't look too closely. But once exposed, their legacies collapse faster than a house of cards in a gust of truth. The verdict is clear. Megyn Kelly doesn't just question Walz, she obliterates him. His contradictions, his evasions, his failures, everything comes crashing down under the harsh light of scrutiny. And in the end, Tim Walz is left with nothing but the broken pieces of his carefully crafted image, his Minnesota nice persona turned into political rubble for all to see.